Hello, everyone. This is the David Goodman Reality and Truth Show. Thank you so much for tuning in today. My name is Vanita Lambert, and this is my partner, Donna Boyne, who is here every single week with me. And we have a very special guest today, Mr. Jeffrey Fletcher. He is the director of the African American Collections Incorporated. He's going to be telling us all about that. And we also have my NCNW sister, Sylvia Bullfolk Martin, here with us again. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming today.
Thank you.
How's everybody doing? How you doing, Donna?
I'm doing fine.
You doing good?
I'm doing great, great
That's
to
a
be
short
here.
answer. We'll take that. And how are you, Sylvia?
I'm doing fine. I'm blessed. I'm just glad that you kept the faith in me and Jeff to get this connection going, because what he has is very important to get out there to the community.
Thank you so much for making this happen. Mr. Fletcher,
Yes.
thank you so much for coming. I know how busy you are, and we really do appreciate you taking the time to come and tell us about this African American collections that's right here in our community. So why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with this.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. So the collection, my collecting didn't start until the passing of my parents, some 10, 11 years ago. My mom and dad, their origins are from the South Carolina and North Carolina. My mom from Camden, South Carolina. My dad from a place called Fuqua Farina, South Carolina. But the story goes as we were growing up. My mom, she would always go to tag sales and auctions, and there were things that she would pick up, and there were a lot of times I would often wonder, why is she bringing other people's junk back to our house? and this went on for years. And she wasn't a hoarder of any sort, but I started to remember seeing her kind of classifying and cataloging different things that she had got along the way, and people have donated to her. But they were all symbolic of the mammy shakers, the negative advertisements about people of color, those sorts of things. But still, it did not resonate with me that these had some symbolic meaning years down the road, decade down the road or so. So growing up, there were things that my mom was doing, not so much my dad, but he would be her chauffeur to take her from point A to point B. And I want to preface that people would probably, we see these shows that they identify hoarders. My mom wasn't that. As I said, they were all neatly placed and put in containers. So as I got to college, I'm one of 4 children. My brother and sisters, they matriculated at HBCU schools at North Carolina Central and Durham. And I was the one that was home, and I would come home from high school. I was an athlete in high school as well, and I would come home and I would see these things accumulating. Actually occupying space in our house where my brother and my sister's rooms were, and I would say, they're not going to be too happy about this, but needless to say, they found a way to manage to stay where they were, where these objects were. And as I got into college, I'm a graduate of the University of New Haven, and I was a 4-year a student athlete there, playing basketball. And my time spending at home was kind of delayed because of the regimen of being a student athlete and traveling and staying and academically eligible to play.
That's automatically 5 years in college when you're a student athlete, because you have to spread it out, your homework with the games, especially basketball. Now, March Madness was huge. You can't be doing schoolwork during March Madness.
Yeah, I mean, it was a rigorous schedule.
Yeah.
But needless to say, I fought through it, got through it, and when I did have the opportunities to go home during breaks, when we had spring break or summer break, or when we didn't make any type of post-tournament bid, I would go home and same stuff would be there, but more of her objects. And I used to say this to her all the time, because we used to have this running conversation. My mom was my best friend, as my dad was. And so we would be able to say anything we want to say. So I would look around and I would say, you know, you guys remind me of Fred Sanford and Lamont. and
That's a good one.
Yeah, and for all you all that don't know who Fred Sanford and Lamont, I'm kind of like aging myself, but it's in syndication now on televisions where it's an old, a senior African-American junk man and his son who have gone into business, just gathering junk and collecting, and everything to Fred Sanford was of value, right? So you know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
And everything I questioned about my mom, I would say, why do you have that? That's junk. And over time, my mom was very, very spiritual, and she was a woman who didn't mince her words, but she would get her point across. And so she would look at me, and I reside in Branford, Connecticut now, and at the time I was in New Haven, and I was living in one of those luxury townhouses and condominiums, and she would say, you know what, this is my junk. I like my junk, and you know what you can do? You can go back to your luxury condo apartment and live in your luxury condo apartment. I love you. You're welcome to come. But this is my junk, and this is my world. This is what I like, and someday it'll represent something, and someday it won't. And so with that said, I took it. I was never one to give any opposition to her commentary or anything that she said. So at that time, I took all that in stride, and then unfortunately, she had a massive coronary, and she passed away in 2000. And so my dad was still alive, and they had been coming up on their 52nd anniversary of their marriage. And so I come from Colchester, Connecticut. And for all of those that don't know where Colchester is, it's up by the University of Connecticut, like right outside the University of Connecticut,
Okay.
which was one of the places I was recruited to go to play basketball, but it was too close to home. And my parents, I wanted to stay in state so that they could see me, but I didn't want to stay too close to home and didn't want to go too far. So that's the geographic location where I ended up matriculating and growing up, and that's where my parents migrated from the south to the north. And so when they passed, I got a phone call, and my dad said, you need to come up and retrieve some of your things. Now, my mom, she had collected everything from our elementary school days, junior high school days, high school, our caps and gowns, our mortarboards, our sashes from our colleges, anything that we had achieved in our lives, she had collected, and we never really took anything. It stayed there. So for some reason or other, she had the presence of mind, which was, to this day, I truly believe that she knew the end was coming. And she had packed up everything that belonged to my brother and my two sisters in these huge Rubbermaid bins. And I never knew this. And so my dad called and said, you need to come home because you have some things here your mother packed up. And I'm like, why would she pack up our things? And that's when it dawned on me that she had a premonition that she would no longer be alive at some point in time during the course of that year. So as I got there, I walked into the den, and I saw these massive blue bins just piled up, stacked up. And my dad, I said to him, where are my bins? And they were labeled. And my things, he said, right there. I said, oh, I must got 2 of them. And he said, no. He said, there's like 9 of them, and they're yours. Now, if you know, I said my elementary school, junior high, high school, college, and anything that I've done, I said my life is probably 2 bins, if that. And he said, no, your mother left some things for you. So I went over, and I started taking the lids off, and I was looking, and I went, oh, no. And they were the objects that she had collected over the course of the year, which I did not say she collected as well as being a child. I'm growing up in Jim Crow South.
That's tough.
Yeah, and so I looked in the bins and I saw all of these things, and some of the things were familiar, some of them were never familiar to me because I never seen them and
You
were
remember?
exposed. Or it wasn't exposed at the time when my mother and I were going back and forth on what's junk, what's valuable, what's going to be, money worthy and
Right,
so
right.
forth. And so when I opened them up and I said to my dad, I said, this stuff is not mine. He said, yes, it is. Your mother left it for you.
Wow.
So I had to take a deep breath and I said, there's no way that I'm going to be able to bring these things back in my SUV. So I had to rent a van, a U-Haul van, and go back up a week later, and I transported them back to my home in Brantford, and my daughter helped me, and we went into my basement, we put them out, and I started taking things out, and my basement was pretty big, and I started laying everything out, and as I'm looking, I'm seeing a sea of just any and everything, from slavery, from newspapers,
Oh, wow.
Reverend Dr. King's assassination, shackles, mammy dolls, and over an assortment of just things that were reminiscent of African American history.
That
And
she collected that you classified as junk,
Junk,
at the
correct.
time.
Because
Okay.
my head
I just want to
wasn't
make
there.
sure I'm following
Right,
the
yeah,
story.
right, right.
Because my head wasn't there. I'm a retired New Haven, if I didn't mention, I'm a retired New Haven police officer. I
okay.
spent 20 years on the force there. And how I met
Yeah.
Sylvia was years before that, going into policing. I met her through the mental health system as a mental health worker. And she was in mental health nurse, psychiatric nurse, and we crossed our paths then. And those were good years. They had some highs and some lows,
Don't they all?
but
Life.
it was a process.
Right.
That's
And I believe we go through these processes in order to be where we are
to
today.
grow. Yeah.
God
So-
driven.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so as I started to reflect and look at everything that I was seeing right there in my basement, I tell this story when I do presentations and so forth. I tell people, as I'm getting ready to tell your audience and you, is that as I'm scratching my head and rubbing my forehead and rubbing my eyes, my daughter's looking at me, and all of a sudden I said to her, I think what we need to do is I think we need to call 1-800-JUNK.
Oh, no.
Oh yeah, because now I still have
That was the
not.
last thing I expected to hear.
Well,
Exactly.
well, there was something that occurred just as I finished that last word, junk. All of a sudden, I had this tremendous pain that shot through my neck.
Wow.
Like it was almost like it was like holy mackerel. I said to my daughter, I said,
Like
"What
your
was
mother
this?"
slapped
That was your
you?
mother,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Your mother slapped you.
Exactly, and it was, and it was.
Oh, my stuff
Said, boy.
And that's what I say. I said it was my mother kind of like getting my attention
Yes.
to say, you got to be out of your mind.
Right.
And so at that
Your
point,
mother's name was?
my mom's name was Ruby and my dad's name was Calvin.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, my daughter looked at me and she said, Dad, what happened? I said, I don't know. I got to sit down for a second. that's how impactful
Wow.
that awakening was.
Say thanks,
Got to
Ruby.
give you fully.
Yeah, she had my attention. And so I sat on that for about a week, maybe 2 weeks, and I said, I slept it, prayed on it, and then I just kept getting these vibes, these messages, and because you're in mental health, and I was in mental health, I wasn't receiving auditory hallucinations
Yeah.
and going through any type of post.
They were real, like
post-
premonitions?
They
Right.
were real. They were real.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I sat down and I said, this is messaging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been put in charge to finish her message, carry out her message, because she was very, very pro African American. She was involved in civil rights back home, and and I tell people to this day, when she passed away, there were people for blocks, black, white, Hispanic, poor, wealthy, politicians, even her medical team that attended to her at the hospital from St. Francis Hospital. Nurses came in, doctors were there, and I just couldn't understand. And I said to my father, I said, Daddy, who are these people? He said, these were the people that your mother went to bat for at court, went to jail cells. We lived right around the corner from the Connecticut State Police, which is Troop K in Colchester. And so there were people that were incarcerated there, held on, and she'd go up and have them bailed out, be their voice in courts.
Wow, she touched so many lives.
Yeah.
Her legacy, you got it there.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
she was in the high schools, the junior high schools, fighting for poor white children who were classified as being special education children, because we know that the education systems they get money allocated to them for how many special education children that they have in their districts.
Yeah.
And so there were children that were being labeled that should not have been in those classes. And back then, I'm dating myself, when I was in junior high and high school, they were actually singled out, ostracized. They stayed in one classroom, and they were ridiculed a lot. And that got to my mom's in her purview, and she would actually go up there and fight for these white, black children.
I remember those.
Right?
Yeah, I remember those special ed classes. I remember that.
And there were there was so much stigmatization on that and myth and stereotypes. And so what she did, the culmination of her collection, right? She had the presence of mind from when she was a child coming up from the South, but she left home at the age of 16 because she comes from a family of 8. And my grandfather lived on my grandfather, grandmother, and my mother, they lived on a plantation or a sharecropper's property, and the oldest children, and I'm jumping all around here because so much is coming back into focus here. And she lived on a sharecropper's farm. She was the oldest of the 8 to second oldest, and the sharecropper, who was white, during harvesting and planting time would come to their house, knock on the door, and ask for the 2 oldest or 3 oldest to come harvest or plant. So her education was interrupted intermittently throughout the period of her life down there. And when she came north on her own, she came with my great-great-grandmother, who you'll see portrayed in what we have now is this African American History Museum, who was a daughter of a slave and was born a year after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. She came north with her. And, but she lived with Jewish people, my mom, who showed her, gave her more education about family, unity, education. And so she prospered a lot and went through a lot as a child, and then coming to Connecticut. So as I had this collection, I decided I needed to memorialize my mother, and what I did was to start packaging, figuring out how to package this information and take it to where it needs to go. And we're talking the early 2000, 2003, and this was before the 1619 project, but the 1619 project has always been in the works. I was just a part of coming in on the tail end of what they have been doing and where they are now. And I didn't know all of this, but I had to figure out how to get this out here, get this information out here, because it was that history that some of us at this table have not. I didn't get up here in Connecticut.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
so important. The history, it's kind of a familiar story that you're telling that was never told to so many others.
Exactly.
And I can't wait to see it. I just,
Not until
I
Black Lives
cannot wait
Matter.
to see
Yeah.
it. So tell us
Somewhat.
the location.
Okay.
I hate to interrupt, but I'm so
The-
excited
the-
about
dude-
it. I'm about to jump out of my seat because I love this story. This is a great story.
Yeah, isn't
So
it?
there's just so much to it, but I'm gonna, for the sake of not being so time consuming, I mean, I do this in presentations when it was traveling all along the East Coast and South, where it was packaging it and lugging it and shipping it and trying to find people who were going to handle it with care like me. It had some ups and downs, and over the years, I just decided that I wanted a brick and mortar to put this in. And along came the National Museum, which is in Washington, D.C., which I visited twice, and that just took me over the edge. because as I went there, my daughter and I were looking, and she was saying, "Daddy, you have that. Daddy, you have
Wow.
that. Daddy, you have
Get
that."
outta here.
And the more she kept saying that, and I kept saying, "You're right." And then I couldn't wait to get back home, go to my storage area, which was my basement, and other places and cavities in my home, that I had everything boxed up. And I look and I said, "You're right." And then it just became more strong that I'd say we needed a brick and mortar. So as I was doing these presentations, going to colleges and going to various high schools and community centers, the town of Stratford plugged in to what I have been doing for the last 5 or 6 years. And with the help of Sylvia, making inroads and coming in here, the high schools have received me at least on 2 occasions per year, every year or every other year. St. James School, Bunnell, Stratford High, Baldwin Center,
Baldwin Center, Bird's
biggest
Eye Complex.
Bird's Eye Complex.
Wow.
So
to
I
do your presentations.
yes,
Oh, wow.
and set up displays. So I consider myself a part resident of Brantford, where I live, part resident of Stratford, and because the relationship has gotten strong, at that point. I met with the mayor and administrators here in the town, and it took us some time to hash out and figure out, because I'm a 501c3, and so that works to the advantage of me wanting to have a structure. So to get to that question, Vanita, where is this? So we are right here at the corner of East Broadway and Main Street. It is like 2 houses away, or 2 structures away, at 952 East Broadway here in Stratford.
Okay.
Most people will know that this was called the Copperwatt House.
Copperwatts.
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 I have-
Mr. Copperwatts used
Yeah.
to be my gym teacher when growing up in Pequannock, in Bridgeport, and then I ran with him for the 2nd district.
Oh,
But that
okay.
was like 1998
And
or something.
and his wife,
I worked with her.
she
was an RN.
yes, she
Sue.
was Susan Copperwatt.
Copperwatt.
I spoke with her 2 weeks. I'm keeping in touch. She was excited about this journey and this project. And the thing that I have to note here is that as I was going through the home with my design people and curators and graphic people, people always seem to leave something behind. And in the house was her husband's, looks like a high school portrait picture of himself, and a Bible and some other things. And to me, that was a message. Because they did, as she shared with me, they did a lot of entertaining of foreign students in the home, because he was an educator. And so I told her that the transition is not permanent transition from her home to a museum, but there will always be some sort of place for where their lives were that will be identified in this museum, because there was a start, and now this is a transition into the museum.
Wow. This is amazing.
Yeah, so the whole project is, and I better say this, my sponsor is Sherman and Sterling law firm out of Manhattan, New York, which is
okay.
a international and domestic acquisition and a merger law firm. They are from all over the world in the United States, and they have been my sponsor and my answer to my mom, keeping her legacy going on. with
Wow.
this.
How did you get such a prestigious sponsor?
Yeah.
How did that come about? I mean, just from doing presentations and they
No,
caught on, or?
No, and here's the thing: for people
That's
who
amazing.
people who are spiritual, I believe, and sometimes I get a little emotional, but I promised myself I wouldn't today. So it's
No, you can get emotional. I mean, the spirit moves
It's
you.
real.
You,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
can't
Be
control
yourself.
that.
It's-
And I saw this watching a movie. The spirit is the spirit.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
comes when it comes.
And so this everything is spiritual, and I believe everything happens because there are angels watching, my mom, my dad, and my older sister who recently passed 2 years of metastatic breast cancer.
I am so sorry.
Sorry about that.
I believe they're watching. They have been watching.
Oh,
Yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
There's such,
Yeah.
you know what? This story is touching my heart.
yeah.
And, you know, I can see your passion about it. And it's not just something that came about. This is something that started from your mother, from your father. Yeah, you have to carry this legacy on. I cannot wait to view it. The grand opening is what, next Friday?
No, that's where the spiritual blessing will be.
Oh, the blessing,
which
I'm sorry.
Which we'll get to.
I'm jumping the gun.
yeah,
It's not next Friday.
No, so my generous sponsor, the general counsel for the law firm, his name was Bill Roll, William Roll, and he oversees all of the attorneys that they have all over the globe in the United States. So I was sitting and to show how this has taken about, I didn't have a special office or anywhere where I could figure out how to do them in, the tracking or the keeping records of anything, conversation. It was just my iPhone and my iPad. And thank God prior to the pre-COVID era, I just happened to have put enough information out there in the ethers. And Bill Roll, he calls. And, we emailed a little bit because I was throwing my hat out there. And
Right.
he connected to the email, and next thing I know, we're talking about doing something, giving them an opportunity to be a part of this journey, and they've been really great, and we're right now talking about the Sterling House because the law firm was founded by John W. Sterling, who was a Yale graduate and a Columbia Law School graduate, who co-founded the law firm Sterling and Sherling in New York. And his summer home was the white home that you see on the corner of Main Street, and the families, they donated the Sterling House Community Center as well, next door. So these have been some very, very powerful people who wanted to deliver my message.
Yeah, that is a fantastic story.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, those are very influential people and events. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Oh my goodness.
You're going to have part 2. You got to come back on.
Yeah, when you get
it.
time.
Yeah.
We have about 1 minute left.
Okay.
To the show. I'm sorry, it goes
Okay.
by so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you like to share with our audience about your collection in terms of when they might get an opportunity to view it and so on and so forth, and what to look for, your email, your website, or what have you?
Yeah,
if you
so
would, please.
what I would like, I want to invite the community out to the blessing of the property as well as the museum. That's going to occur next Friday, which is September 24th. From 2 o'clock on. In light of rain, there will be a canopy, there will be refreshments. Everybody can get to meet me, my team, and to hear more about this vision and this journey. The opening, anticipating for October 30th. This is going to be an exciting time, and it's going to historic, right?
Yes.
And the thing is, we don't need to be afraid of this history. I didn't as I tell people, I didn't manufacture it. I didn't script it. It is what it is, and I hope to get everybody out to support this, as well as to come meet me and we'll talk. But the next week, you'll be able to take a tour through just to see the shell and see exact spaces of what is to come in October.
Well, thank you so much. I will definitely be there. I want to thank you, and you're welcome back anytime. We're out of time. This is the David Goodman Reality and Truth Show, and we're on your side.